Morning, everybody. We will be starting exactly in 5 minutes. We will be starting exactly in 5 minutes. Whether the board members are on or anybody else, personnel is on, we will be starting at 10 o'clock. All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
Okay, we are live on YouTube now, and Beverly, you're the host again.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
I'll say it, Ms. Glory. Good morning back to you.
Good morning. There were others that waved.
Oh, okay.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, Miss Malden. Very cool background, Eric.
Thank you, Clinton. I'm working on getting off the screen here. Beverly needs to do it though.
All right, Ms. Beverly, I got the time as 10 o'clock and we're getting ready to go ahead and start our emergency called transit meeting for Chattanooga Transit. The special meeting, I should say. Meeting is now called to order at 10 o'clock. Can we have the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Chairman Jones,
I'm present.
Dr. O'Halloran, waiting on his
see-
audio connection.
I see him logging in. You go ahead and mark him present. Go ahead to the next one.
Mr. Cody,
Present.
Mr. Edmister,
Present.
Mr. Leggett,
Here.
Mr. Lakakis, he is dialed in. I have to locate his number. Dr. Robinson,
I'm present.
thank you. Ms. Stone, Ms. Odell, Chairman, you have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Beverly. We're going to turn it over as far as presentation is concerned. We have a financial impact of COVID-19 pandemic presentation. I know we got some other information. If you want to talk about that, you can too, Ms. Malden.
Just so you know, I'm here.
Yeah, I saw your audio was keeping up. I told her, go ahead, mark you present, brother.
All right, thanks.
Jay, I'm here too.
Okay,
Thank you, Commissioner
thank
Stone.
you.
Ms.
Okay.
Malden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to everyone. As many of you all are aware by now, Chatham Area Transit is currently dealing with a potential funding shortfall. And the leadership team, along with a few special consultants, are in the process of evaluating our finances and preparing contingency plans for various scenarios. I became aware of this situation a couple of weeks ago, and we have worked tirelessly with our partners at the FTA to get our CARES Act funding in. And I'm pleased to announce that this morning, the CARES Act funds are in and ready to be drawn down. However, the receipt of the CARES Act funding does not change the sense of urgency and does not end the need for this meeting and for me to make you aware of our financial situation. In coming to Chatham Area Transit as the CEO, I promised open communication, I promised transparency, I promised candid conversation, and that's really the spirit in which this request to have this meeting was submitted. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Ms. Jeray Williams, who is a highly qualified financial expert that has an extensive background in public finance, in banking, and she has been an invaluable resource to us as we have worked to get to the bottom of our financial situation. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Williams at this time.
Ms. Williams, give me just a second. Prior to Ms. Williams speaking, can I ask everybody to please make sure you put yourself on mute and then also hold all questions to the end of the presentation. Put yourself on mute and hold all questions to the end of the presentation. I apologize, Ms. Williams. You have the floor.
Thank you and good morning to everyone. I'm waiting for the presentation to be pulled up. I don't know if Beverly's doing the presenting. Who's sharing their screen for the PowerPoint.
Until we get that up, can you give us a little background on yourself?
So I was brought in last week, Wednesday, to assist Chatham Area Transit with looking at their financials to figure out what the cash impact and implications would be moving forward, not just with the grant, but from a historical perspective and moving forward. I also was asked to look at how to bring the transit authority up to a position to issue bonds in the future, if that's the desire of this governing board, as well as Ms. Bakara as CEO want to do that in the future for capital projects. So there's a couple of different veins of the way I looked at it, but overall, I think this will paint the picture of what's been happening at the transit agency and then how we can move forward. Beverly, you can proceed, please. Thank you. So just for the benefit of the board, CAT has used accrual funding method, which is an accounting method that is required by GASB and the IRS. This accounting method allows the agency to document or record earned revenues even though they have not been received. So accrual takes into account things like the grant that was going to be received but was received today, but it is not cash on hand in the bank. So historically, the statements that the board received were in that format. While this method complies with financial regulations, it does not represent the organization's actual cash position. You can.
Miss Williams, give us just a second. Okay, now. Okay.
You can just load everything on that PowerPoint. So this first chart is what was adopted, what the board decided to adopt for the fiscal 21 year budget revenues. That was a total of $27.6 million. And as you can see in the chart, it is segregated by the different areas of revenue based on the services and programs that CAT offers. I don't see the PowerPoint up. So if everybody has it, they can pull it up. I can just walk them through it.
Give me.
I'm getting it back on the screen, Miss Williams. One moment.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Was the PowerPoint attached to the agenda? Because I have the agenda, but I don't see an attachment.
The PowerPoints were not attached to the agenda. We wanted to present the information first. We will be sending the PowerPoints out to the entire board immediately following this meeting. And we apologize for the technical difficulties. Beverly, if you need me to share my screen, I have the PowerPoint up.
And I do as well, if I could help.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bonda, do you want to pull it up from your end? Do you see the green arrow?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, just a second. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So in the first upper left-hand quadrant is the fiscal year 21 budgeted revenue that was adopted by the board back in June. That is the exact picture of what was adopted based on the services and programs the staff provided to the board as revenue sources for this fiscal year. The lower left-hand bottom quadrant is the change in what's happening with the revenues and what we are projecting moving forward. Obviously, it's skewed because the grant came in, and so that exceeds the original adopted budget. But this is the picture that is painted for the projected revenues going forward. The upper right and lower left-hand quadrants, nothing has changed in these. The expenditures will remain the same as projected today, unless there's some changes that may be discussed by the CEO later on in this presentation. Move to the next slide, please. So historically, CAT has operated at a net operating loss. When the board adopts a budget for each fiscal year, usually the budget serves as the blueprint to ensure the organization stays within its thresholds, but also demonstrates sound financial management. On this chart, you will see that the audited revenues, which is represented in the dark blue bars, they have exceeded most fiscal years. over the adopted budget, which is in, actually, this wasn't the updated presentation, but the adopted budget is actually the orange bars. More importantly, not only have the audited expenses, which is in the lime green, exceeded adopted budget expenses, which is the orange because the colors change, but it has trended upward every year. So you'll see the linear trend line for the audited expenses, which is the lime green bars, and you see a trend upwards every year, regardless of the revenues. This increase, the increase in expenses have continuously put pressure on the organization's actual cash and cash reserves. Presently, the cash reserves are around $15,000 in the Georgia Fund 1 account, and the cash on hand is $1.1 million in the operating account. CAT's current operating spend is approximately $2.3 million per month. The next slide, please. So with regards to the cash on hand for all funds, and this includes the operating funds, the grants, this historical trend shows the ending cash balance for each audited fiscal year. Please note the column and ending balance column. As stated before, the organization's spend rate leaves no room to build cash reserves or support the monthly spending rate if revenues are impacted. Next slide. So during COVID-19, a pay structure was implemented to capture employees' hours spent on COVID activities for the CARES Act grant. Unfortunately, the implementation of this new pay structure led to regular hours being charged as COVID and exempt administrative staff charging above their regular 80-hour biweekly pay. CAT spent a total of $3.9 million for regular overtime and COVID pay from April 3rd to June 30th. Approximately $2.9 million of that total was coded to COVID pay. Notwithstanding the COVID pay, and as I alluded to earlier, CAT has operated at a net loss. The continuation of cash flow impacts in this fiscal year is compounded by the fare-free routes, as you see under number 1, fare revenues, the COVID-19 pay, which was $2.9 million. And this will be subsidized by the CARES Act grant now that the money has come in today. Number 4, a decline in special tax district revenue. The county has communicated a $600,000 decrease in collections for this fiscal year versus what was budgeted and adopted. And then several event cancellations, the unknown or an uncertainty of if COVID is going to continue past this calendar year, that would have an impact on things like St. Patrick's Day and some other special events that typically are revenue drivers for CAT. Also, minor route changes and adjustments and trying to meet the decreasing demand has had an impact on cash flow as well. However, once revenues do begin to stabilize, it still won't address the increased monthly spending rate. Slide 6, please. So this is the cash flow analysis. After a thorough review, it is our recommendation to do the following: to reduce spending by 20% or $5.8 million, which will result in cash reserves of 2.5 to 3 times. The second recommendation is to create a cash reserve policy. A best practice with other transit agencies nationally have a fund balance policy or cash reserve policy to help mandate how that cash is spent in times of emergencies, and it's also governed by the sitting board. And then third, in line with the CEO's objectives to segregate fixed route, paratransit, and ferry services into enterprise funds. You may be familiar with the structure of enterprise funds, similar to municipal government, how they segregate water and sewer or other utility services or other revenue driving services. They segregate that so they can capture the real direct and indirect cost for each service.
And then thank you very much, Ms. Williams. One thing I want to call your attention to, you may notice that on the prior slide, there's a 20% and 30%. We looked at a couple of scenarios to cut expenses by 30%. We felt might be a little that might be a little unrealistic. And so we in turn looked at the 20%. I didn't have the most updated slide, but I just didn't want any confusion about the fact that you see a 20% and a 30%, but we looked at all of the options in making recommendations. So Ms. Williams has given you kind of the lay of the land in terms of where we stand in front of our finances. As a part of the SCORE plan that you've heard me talk about over and over again, job one was to stabilize and strengthen the finances. So as a part of that, we've come up with some options that will ultimately be a part of our action plan. The magic number that we believe we need to try to cut out of our budget is $5.8 million. And that's no chump change. That's not a small amount. So drastic savings call for drastic measures. And there are four things that we are looking at in order to help us make up the number of $5.8 million. And it may be some combination of all of those. The first one, of course, is salary reductions of the administrative staff, a 10% cut in salary across the board from top to bottom of all the administrative staff. Two, of course, furloughs of administrative staff for about 5 weeks. And this could be done on a rotating basis, on a periodic basis. There are many scenarios that other agencies have implemented, including one week a month furloughed and things like that. And then there's three, which is a reduction in force or a RIF, layoffs, or even offering early retirement packages. We have looked at our staff list in terms of identifying people or employees who may be eligible for early retirement packages. We are looking at the feasibility of whether or not it would be advantageous to go forward with those types of packages. And then, of course, we've identified a list of employees that could potentially be impacted by a reduction in force or layoff. And then, of course, you know, as the new CEO, I was charged with restructuring the organization to make sure that we were running efficiently. So all of that plays in together. And then, of course, option 4 is a service reduction. And the service reduction, we've looked at about 5 different options. And actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Michael Brown to jump in at this point and just briefly share with you about the service reduction options that we've looked at. Each option impacts numerous lives, and know that it is something that we don't take lightly. I have really struggled with all of this. I knew that I was inheriting a challenge when I took this position. I can honestly tell you, I wasn't expecting to have to deal with this challenge so fast. So in keeping this in mind, I want to ask Mr. Brown to go into the service reduction options and share the information that the team has come up with. Oops.
You have the floor, Mr. Brown.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Malden. Good morning, everyone. I was asked to put together some options for possible service reduction with the help of the operations department, planning, finance, and as Ms. Malden said earlier, some of our special consultants. And the following slides represent the work put in. Next slide, please. So this first slide represents the operating costs, the revenue cost per day, weekday, this is currently, weekday, Saturday, holiday, and Sunday. That's what it costs to actually run the service. The fuel costs are actually part of that overall cost, but I broke the fuel costs down a little separate so you could see it. The calculations are based on $99 per hour. That's the fully loaded cost to run the fixed route. which includes the wages, fuel, maintenance, and administrative costs. Next slide, please. So the way that's broken down, that number, 52% of that number, that $99 or an hour, is wages and benefits. Another 13% is materials, supplies, maintenance costs, fuel, and things of that nature. And the other 35% are miscellaneous costs. That's insurance, services, utilities, and things like that. Just to give you a little background on what's in that number. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to have you look at ridership a little bit. We were averaging about 245, 246,000 riders per month before the pandemic hit, that in January and February. And as you can see, in March, the numbers started to go down quite a bit. And then this is overall ridership. And then obviously in April and May were the lowest ridership months when everything was locked down. And we were running much less service than we normally would be running. So that affected that as well. And in June, it started an uptick when we went back to still a modified schedule, but a more robust service model. And as you can see in July, it's ticked up a little more. Next slide. This slide represents each route's monthly ridership and through January. And I thought it was important that we put this slide on here to show to show you what the routes are doing individually. As we move further in these slides, I'll kind of tie it all together. The 14 Abercorn, which everyone knows, is no surprise to anyone here, is our best performing route, and that's the route you see on the top. But as you saw on the previous slide, when we started running reduced service, all of our numbers took a hit, which is natural because we had less routes out on the road. But this just gives you an idea individually of what each route has done, and the previous slide was collectively. Next slide. All right, so this slide represents our staffing levels. This is current. Weekday, we need 84 operators to run the service weekday in our current service model. Saturday, 61 operators on this holiday. And the reduced COVID-19, 30, that's the schedule we were running when we had the least amount of ridership. We were using the least amount of operators as well. And then a typical Sunday schedule, which is 27 operators. This is the total number of operators, as you see right there. We have 206 full-time and 6 part-time. And just as a note, these services do not include our contract services. So no dot shuttle, no SSU, no senior circulator. This is just the core ridership, the service. Next slide, please. So here's really the meat of the work that everyone has put in. This just gives you an idea in a chart form of some of the options that we put together, and they range from, I'm not going to go into each one of them because you will be provided with a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. However, I will say they range from about 5% reduction, which would be eliminating our 3 worst performing routes, lowest ridership routes, to running about up to a 61% decrease, which would be going back to a COVID-19 service model. And then anything in between, a Saturday schedule, which is about 12% less than what we're running now, and holiday and a holiday plus schedule, which provides service for every route. And again, you will be provided with this as well. At the bottom of this, it gives you some sort of staffing level reduction based on the model chosen. Next slide, thank you. And then what this represents is the paratransit operation. And this is pretty much the same model based on the same level of reduction in service, what it would look like for the paratransit operation as well, and the number of reduction in staff that would be needed to meet the new service model with the reduction in service. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Ms. Dumas, if you would go back to the action plan slide for me, please. And while she's doing that, just wanted to again let the board know that we have, our team has worked tirelessly even over the weekend to come up with these options. I wanted to just circle back around and just talk about the number of employees that would be impacted by these options and the amount of savings that each one of these options would offer. Again, with the salary reductions, we're looking at impacting 73 employees for a savings of up to $1 million. With the furloughs, we're looking at impacting 73 employees with a savings of up to $500,000. And then, of course, with the risks, the layoffs, or the retirement packages, we're looking to impacting up to 38 employees, but could save up to $1 million. We could also, with the service reductions, we would impact up to 34 employees with a savings of up to $3,340,630. So we're looking at possibly doing a combination of these options. The number that we're working to get to is $5.8 million. The goal is to replenish our reserves and to ensure that we have the operating cash flow that we need to operate from month to month. And then, of course, to pay off the $1.5 million line of credit that was received earlier this year. So I can go into more detail if it is the chairman's pleasure to go into an executive session about the impact that this would have specifically on the employees, or entertain any questions that you may have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, at this time, are you complete with as far as the PowerPoint is concerned?
Yes, sir, I am.
At this time, I'm here to entertain any kind of questions that may be arise.
I have a question.
All right, Commissioner Stone, you have the floor.
Thank you. We have an audit done. Our audits are usually done about this time of the year. Have we done an audit for 2019 yet, or 2020, excuse me? 2020.
Not yet. We're in the process of having that audit done, but we wanted the opportunity to be aware of the existence of any issues before the actual audit happened. We wanted to have an idea about our cash flow and our financial situation prior to the audit. We didn't want to wait for the audit findings.
Okay, well, I did not come back on the board until last fall, so I was wondering, I knew that we should have had an audit done, and why we haven't, which might have led us in the direction of problems. And secondly, if we are in the middle of an audit or engaged in an audit, my suggestion at this point, we might want to go one step further and have a forensic audit. I honestly believe that as one board member, I find it alarming that we don't really have a handle on what's going on with CAT's finances.
Commissioner Stone, when we had a conversation, and Ms. Molden had this conversation, not I, it was said that we changed auditing firms, and when we change auditing firms, usually new auditing firms do somewhat of a forensic audit of the previous organization. And so to pay for a forensic audit, when we know that the audit company is coming in that's going to do a deeper dive than normal on their first drive, they kind of said that it's not necessary for us to pay for a forensic audit now. The amount of expense it would cost us would be a lot more versus them already going in and doing a deep dive in the previous audit results.
When did we vote to change firms?
That was last year, early last year. We're with the same firm that we have with the county is the same firm that's now with Chatham Area Transit.
Okay, I wasn't aware that we had changed firms, and the only reason I think that's an issue is because the previous firm, I believe, had been there a while and might have some historical data that might be important going forward to understand how CAT is in the position that it is right now. That's just my concern.
Yeah. And Ms. Marlin, correct me if I misquoted, misstated anything, please let me know.
No, not at all. And the information from our prior audits and from our prior auditor, we still have access to that information and can call them at any time if there's any information that we need pertaining to the years that they audited. So we're absolutely keeping the lines of communication open.
As a board member that's been on the board, gone off and come back on, I mean, this is not the first time that the board, and this has nothing to do with you, but this is not the first time the board has been at an emergency situation for the financial condition of Chatham Area Transit. Of course, the last time was when there were problems with the CEO and he was indicted, and ultimately went to prison. But the point is, that CAT was in very dire straits at that point as well, and the board was left in the dark. So I want to make sure that going forward, I mean, the board is to set policy, and I feel like these sort of bombshells, this is the second time a financial bombshell has been dropped on the board. And I just don't understand how we rock along and think we're doing fine, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're not. So I want to make sure that ceases to happen in the future. I just think that it's a terrible situation to put the board in, not to mention the staff, the employees. It's not good. But obviously, you know, we were left clueless.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Stone.
Ma'am.
Something to follow? Yes, ma'am.
I just, first of all, Commissioner Stone, your concerns are definitely understood and valued. Again, I committed to you all to communicate openly and transparently, and this is what we're doing. Unfortunately, I can't go back and in time to address anything that may have happened before, but I hope that you will see our efforts today as an effort to keep the board, you know, informed, to basically create a governing team, a partnership between the CEO and the board. And a part of solidifying that partnership is making sure that you all know exactly where we stand and ensuring that you have the information that you need to make the best decisions in the interest of the agency. And that's all I really wanted to say to that. I definitely hear you, and we're going to do our best to ensure that you are not in the dark.
That's why I'm very interested in getting this audit done, because it's very difficult to understand where we are financially. We're getting a presentation today, but the entire board got a letter from the former CEO, you know, contradicting some of what we're hearing. So this is a real problem.
The former CFO.
I'm sorry, CFO, I apologize. But you understand what I'm saying. I mean, getting, you know, where is the truth in all this? And that's why I'm very adamant about an audit. And if it needs to be a forensic audit, then I want to know, quite frankly, excuse my language, but what the hell is going on?
Thank you, Commissioner Stone. Ms. Malden. I have Dr. Michael Holleran, and then I have Commissioner Tabitha Odell in that order. Dr. Holleran, you have the floor.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions and maybe a comment or two. Where did we come up with the $99 service hour figure? Is that including administrative?
I'm going to let Mr. Brown answer that because they did the extensive work. But it is my understanding that the $99 does include administration. And so, Mr. Brown, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but that was my understanding.
That is correct. That was a number from finance that does include administration.
Okay, because I was under the assumption that for the last 2 years, we were at $112 a service hour. That's the number we've been talking about. The 99 was from like 3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it? Because I know when we redid the Savannah State contract, it was at like $92 and we upped it to $112. So
Well,
I don't know how the calculations got us down to 99, but I was under the assumption for the longest time it was 112.
Well, I will speak as far as my position. That's the first time hearing the 112 number. I've only heard the 99 number. So I don't know when it increased to 112.
This goes way back to when we were reevaluating the SSU contract a year and a half ago because it was underfunded and they ended up sending us 350,000 that they mistakenly didn't pay us because the system for calculating it was done wrong.
Well, I guess maybe I should say it like this. Maybe that was general information for all of us. That's the first time hearing the 112 number as far as I'm concerned. I can't speak for any other board member, but I know that's the first time me hearing the 112 number.
Okay, well, that's the one I had in my head because that's the one we were talking about using going forward. But if no one else has it, then maybe I hallucinated that one. With this budget that we did for this year, when we sat down, we based it on the 1.15 millage rate that the county had told us in January was going to be our money allotment, that there would be no increase in millage. On that basis, we did a 5 to 10% reduction on costs and service. Now you're talking about we want to do another 20% on top of that. Is that the number I'm hearing? So we're looking at a 30% reduction overall.
No, we're looking at a 20% reduction in expenses.
On
across
top
the-
of that 10% that we've already added in for the budget that we adopted starting July 1st.
Yes, sir. We have to balance our budget and
That
whatever.
I understand.
Mike, if you're not going to give her a chance to answer the question, brother, I mean, you asked the question.
She said we have to balance the budget. I understand that. Of course we have to. That's our job as an agency. I know we had built up an excess of 1.6 million. The FTA likes to see 3 times that. So we were working towards getting to that 4.8. Unfortunately, COVID wiped that out. It extended the line of credit. I'm not happy with us having to do cuts. I don't know how it got to this. I know we did cuts in the past when Curtis took over because of the previous problem that we had. I didn't see anything in the audit that was really a problem with the tax revenues and the CARES money. I thought we were going to be fine. I don't know where it went from there to here.
And some of those questions will be answered in our executive session, sir.
Okay.
You have any other questions, sir?
Not yet then.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I have Ms. Williams just speak briefly to the discrepancy in terms of the reporting and whatnot? Ms. Williams, would you briefly speak to that?
Yes, so the reports that the board historically received were in an accrual accounting format. So as I stated earlier, accrual accounting, while it complies with the financial regulators, it overstates and understates your cash position. So for instance, before the fiscal year ended, when there was an anticipation of an $8 million CARES Act grant coming in, it was already recorded on the general ledger based on the accrual method, even though the cash was not in the bank. The
Right.
cash did not come into the bank, and it still is not in the bank until we officially draw down those funds from the FTA. So while accrual accounting is the preferred method for GASB, but you also have to show 2 different types of financial statements so your governing board understands what the true cash position is, because it will understate the financial position and health of a company easily, or organization very easily, if that person is not providing that information. So when I look back at some of your old board reports, I saw the statement of revenues and expenditures being presented, but there was no cash basis report that was being provided to show you what the actual cash was in the bank.
And so basically we felt that it was important to come to the board because had the CARES Act funding not obligated and be ready for drawdown today. I mean, we were in a situation where I could not take another step without the approval of the board. I wouldn't be able to extend, apply for additional lines of credit. I wouldn't be able to go to any stakeholder or entity to ask for assistance. I wouldn't be able to do any of those without the support of the board. So it's for that reason that we felt like it was important to come to you today to make you aware.
Thank you, Ms. Molden. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mike, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that commentary?
No, I'm good for now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Commissioner Odell, you have the floor.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I have a couple of questions. I'm very concerned that this will impact the drivers, and whatever we do, they need to be impacted the least. It seems that this 5.8 is more than we expected to see this morning. And that to me seems like an issue with previous years. And so have we looked at the previous years to see how many years we've been running with this accrued balance that we thought made us sound versus our cash basis?
Ms. Bakar, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I'm going to let Ms. Williams speak to that because she did go back a little bit and understand we really just took this deep dive really for a solid week. So she didn't have a lot of time, but I'm going to let her share with you exactly how far back she was able to go.
Ms. Williams, you have the floor.
So when you get the presentation, that's why I provided that chart to show historically from 2009. I reviewed every single audit that was performed for CAT since 2009 to try to track what was happening with the spending versus the revenues. And that's what I was showing, that linear trend line with the expenses, because the expenses have always increased every year at an exponential rate versus the revenues. And so the only rationale behind that is, if you added additional staffing, or if you have top-heavy administrative management staff or things of that sort, or adding more routes and services, there should be a one-to-one match with revenue and expenses. But what's happening is the spending rate is increasing at a rate that is really not going to be sustainable long-term for CAT.
Commissioner Odell?
So basically, since 2009, we've been running inefficiently?
I'm not saying inefficiently. What I'm saying is that it's been running at a net loss. So
At a net loss.
yes.
Okay.
All right. You have any additional questions, Commissioner Odell? All
No,
right.
not at this time.
All right. Mr. Cody, Mr. Leggett, Dr. Robinson, do y'all have any questions? I'm sorry.
I've got
I apologize.
a question.
You in the middle, brother. Clint, you have the floor.
Great. Let's see. Could somebody explain to me, and I remember deciding to not do the accrual method at my store, but why is that a beneficial method of accounting?
You
Well,
got it, Ms. Williams, you got it.
Well, we don't have a choice. It's a GASB regulated method. So all government entities or entities that are set up under a certain IRS code has to use the accrual method. And again, it's not the most favorite method. I've been in government finance for years. It's not my favorite method, but that's why it's really important and critical to provide the governing board the cash basis in addition to that, so they understand what's going on.
In layman terms, Clint, we have to have some kind of prediction out there, man. We have to have some kind
Got
of
it.
that we're gonna bring in.
In your opinion, Ms. Williams, is it the accrual accounting method that seemed to hide this situation from us?
Well, I won't say that that was the intention behind the staff to hide anything. I just think that has just been, they were doing their jobs and that's just what it was. But again, there should have been some disclosure to the board that this was not cash in the bank, and that it was, that accrual counting can overstate and understate your financial position.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then maybe a question to just throw out there, but I'd be interested in figuring out what types of forms and reports would you recommend us asking for so that we can have information like this revealed to us without it, I think, getting lost in translation from an accounting vernacular to something that we can all and the public understand a lot easier.
So I've already worked with the, you want me to take that?
Go ahead, and then I want to end that.
Okay, so I've already worked with the finance staff to change the report that is provided to the board. You'll continue to get the statement of revenues and expenses, but I also asked them to add a cash flow projection with the actual cash basis of your expenses and revenues, so you have an idea of what your true cash position is month to month. And so that'll start, I guess, with your next regular meeting. And so you'll see that change then.
And I was just going to add that as we proceed with searching for our next CFO, that is one of the things that we'll be looking for feedback from our new CFO in terms of how we should streamline reporting, as well as be informed by best practices at other agencies. I want to also mention, as a segue, in addition to Ms. Williams, we also have had high-level staff from the Jacksonville Transit Authority also working with our team. The assistant assistant vice president of finance from JTA has also been a part of our super team that we have assembled to ensure that not only are we looking at the global best practices, but we're also drilling it down into transit best practices. JTA is a model agency in the country. It's a great transit agency, very efficient, high performing, and they were able to turn their operations and their administration around. And so we were very appreciative of Mr. Nat Ford for allowing us to utilize some of his high-level staff as we formulated this information.
I've got one more question. This might be a simple one. How much is the CARES funding for? Or if we're calling it's a grant, what's the appropriate, what should I call it?
It is a grant, and it is, I think the actual awarded amount was 10.7. I think that after some, administrative stuff, I think we'll end up with 10.4 in actual cash in our account. And if that's not right, Miss Royal, please jump in.
And I think we'll probably start exploring this a little bit more as we move forward. And Ms. Williams, it sounds like some of the reports, especially a cash accounting report of kind of where they are, will reveal this to me. But I want to make sure that I'm understanding very clearly the movement of our cash on hand, our projected expenses, and the expenses of the last 6 months, and the care money, and how that is all choreographed together and how we expect it to play out. Because I think for me, that's a little bit foggy still. So I'm gonna I feel like I don't yet understand it entirely, but I believe in you guys that I will by the end of the day.
All right, was that a question? You good?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, Jay.
All right, I apologize for you, Mr. Clinton, again. Now I'm going to Alderman Leggett. Did you right? Y'all have anything to say?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Cody, I see you raise your hand. You got the floor, brother.
Yes, I just want to say that I understand that we have to make very tough decisions at a very tough time. But I want to emphasize on what Ms. Odell was saying about our frontline workers and the drivers, because we are definitely going to need those guys when things get back to normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. Dr. Robinson, you have anything to add?
One thing, I think we all recognize that when you look at a budget, the biggest portion of your budget is salaries. So in order to reach your benchmark of 5.8, you're gonna have to cut salary. And again, you know, my position's always been the folk who are out there doing the work need to be protected.
I agree. All right, did we ever get a hold of Pete Lakakis? Because I want to make sure I didn't miss Pete Lakakis. I want to make sure y'all know.
He is at the hospital now with his wife,
Okay. All
with
right.
Ms. Lakakis. Okay.
And I'll go
Yeah,
ahead and put my
he called me and from some restricted number and he said he's not going to be here, but I didn't know he was at the hospital.
Okay. Thank you,
I
Dr.
called
Phillips.
Beverly and let her know that before.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, just in response to Director Cody and Dr. Robinson, that your comments are taken to heart. We have actually, through this whole process, have engaged the union leadership. We have had daily calls as a part of our process, sharing with them the information that the leadership team has come up with, getting their feedback, allowing them to inform our processes. And so we are really blessed to have a really good relationship with our union partners. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing. And so we have had extensive conversations, and we're going to continue the dialogue. I've committed to a daily telephone call with the union leadership to inform them of the decisions that we're making or the direction that we're traveling. On my very first day, as you know, I got to work at 4 a.m. to make sure that I was able to greet the first of the first of the front line, basically. So I'm very, very sensitive to that. And it is really not my intent for operations to shoulder the bulk of the cuts that will possibly need to be made.
All right, thank you, Ms. Molden. I guess I'll close out before we go into an executive session that we did request for this meeting. I want to make sure that we understand that, you know, I appreciate the fact that the CARES Act did come in play. I appreciate not just the new help we're getting as far as contract work and as far as those people from JTA, but I appreciate those people who already work in our existing finance staff. I think what you do is effortless, and we truly appreciate those operators, whether they're in administrative role or whether they're in a union role or an operator role. I think we appreciate all of them, but we also understand that in these kind of times, and I know I mentioned it probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and it probably was an executive session or something like that, but we have to understand that with COVID-19, it changes the direction of everything we got going on. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions to move our narrative forward. And so this is not a personal thing. This is a thing as far as the organization is concerned, that we have to ensure that CAT is providing the greatest service we can possibly provide for Chatham County. So I appreciate everybody, everything. If there's another every out there, I appreciate that too. But I think that we need to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And we chose to have a new CEO who can take these challenges, even though some of these decisions weren't on her, and even though some of these decisions weren't to be negative or bad decisions, but we just got a negative impact behind it. We need to move our narrative forward. And the only way we can do that is working together as one unit, one family, to make sure that we provide the best service in our community. And with that being said, if there's no other commentary, I want Clinton fussing at me. Any other commentary, I think we should be moving into executive session. All right, so I need a first and a second to move in executive session. I see hands.
Motion.
Second.
All right, it's been moved. It's moved by Gertrude Robinson and seconded by
Leggett.
Dietrich Leggett.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
you
sir.
need to announce the purposes for the executive session.
I plan on doing it. Just want to move the motion, but since you asked me to do that, we're moving it based on what I got on our agenda, we'll move to executive session for personnel matters.
What you doing?
Leggett. Now I got to unmute myself. Personal matters and potential litigation. All right, we've had a first and a second. Are we ready for the question? All those in favor of moving to executive session, let's do a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Dr. O'Halloran,
Yes.
Mr. Cody,
Yes.
Mr. Emister,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Aye.
Ms. Stone, Ms. Stone,
Commissioner Stone.
Yes.
Ms. Odell,
Yes.
Chairman Jones,
Not yes.
and Mr. Lakakis is not on the call. Thank
Correct.
you.
All right. As we're in this executive session, we're moving into a back room. We're asking for all those in attendance to hang around into this platform. And then when we come out of the back room, we'll be coming back in this platform. Am I correct, Ms. Beverly?
Yes, sir. That's correct. Okay.
All right, so we have the time I have is 10:56. At 11:01, that's when we'll be moving back into, we'll be moving into executive session. That enough time, Ms. Beverly?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.